Welcome, friends. I'm Heidi Mitro, and joining me is my partner, Michael Mitro. We're going to be talking today about our family's pilgrimage to Minneapolis. And before I started recording this, honey, I was talking about you running primarily in a white town and the conversations that you and I have had for a long time around running. So I actually want to start with the running conversation, and then we can talk about our pilgrimage to Minneapolis. So I was talking, like, you've been an athlete, you've been a runner for, most of your life. And I am curious from your perspective, what it is like to run in rural Wisconsin. And yeah, so welcome, and let's jump right in.
Yeah, all right. Let's do that. Most of the time, I find the activity of running to be therapeutic and calming and necessary on some level.
What do you mean?
It's a time for me to kind of recenter. It's when I do, I think, a lot of my really good thinking, and there's
any of you runners who are watching, we're going to read the comments later, but I find it so interesting when I talk to runners who think when they run, because when I try to run, all I'm thinking is like, oh my God, this hurts. Oh my God, why do people do this? So I'm super curious about all your deep thoughts while you're running, because I don't have that. If you have that, put hashtag running in the comments, but I don't have that. So
yeah, I mean, it is a real, and it can be a stress reliever also at the same time too.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's an emotional component to it as well as the physical.
You froze, babe. We'll give him a second to come on back. Mike has been a long distance runner for our whole relationship. And so I'm always amazed by that, especially when he's like, I'm just going to go for a quick run. And then it's like 3 hours later. You froze there, babe. So you were talking about the emotional component. And then I started talking about your quick runs that turn into
blisters on my feet.
Yes, gross.
So yeah, and then it's in probably within the last 2 years for sure, maybe even actually probably more than that. I've been venturing out a little further outside of town on some of my runs, and I've become keenly aware. I've been purposely more aware of what's happening on me. Run with music on, or in my earbuds, and so I can't always hear everything. But yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, there's lots of different reasons for that, but
for what?
For being more aware of my surroundings, especially when I'm running on the road, like out in the country.
What's our agreement right now about you running out in the country?
What is our agreement?
That you don't.
Oh.
Dang, internet. It's a cute pause for you once you come on back. My concern this actually prompted why Mike started sharing his location with me and keeps it on. And you froze again, babe. I don't know what internet you're on, but you running out in the country is what prompted you sharing your location with me, right?
Well, that was part of it. The other part of it was the story about your friend's husband that was out walking the dog and got caught in that flash flood.
Oh yeah. Yes, so there was a person from my hometown, her husband, very tragic accident, was killed in a flash flood. It was such an it's still so unbelievable. But yes, that was also part of it.
for a long time, I didn't take my phone with me because I had the music on my watch and I could pair that to my earbuds, and it was lighter, you know,
Yep.
less to carry, less to be worried about. And so, but then I, you know, as I started thinking about it more, I was like, okay, what if something happened? Not, um, you know, how would you know, or
Right.
where would you go, you know? And so then I started sharing my location every time I go. So,
And there have
yeah.
been some instances where you have felt unsafe or been, you know,
Mm-hmm.
been followed, been nervous enough about people circling back to pass you again. Like there's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, all of those.
I've had
And so,
cigarettes looked at me, you know.
yeah,
So it's just stuff like that that makes you second guess, and then at the same time, like, yeah, I'm still gonna run, man. Like,
even though I'm like, let's just get a treadmill. Like,
mm-mm,
I
I'm
know.
not a hamster.
So that was a little bit of contrast to what happened over this weekend. So was kind of our a usual weekend. It was a beautiful day. You were going to go out for a run, which is a quick run, which is never a quick run.
Mm-hmm.
I had to check your location several times because I was like, oh, he should be back by now. So I can actually see the dot of where you are. But
Mm-hmm.
tell everybody what happened on this particular run and why it was so different.
Um, well, it started almost about a mile in. Um, Somebody smiled and waved at me, and
Did you
then
know this person?
I did not know this person. And then it happened again, and then it happened again, and then it happened again. And so by the time I got back home, it was
How long were you
probably
gone?
45 minutes, maybe an hour, somewhere in there.
It was
What are
like
you
an hour and a
shaking?
half. Because it
Okay.
was like an hour and a half. You think it's 45 minutes, but it's not.
Okay.
Anyway,
So by the time I got home, I can count on both hands and one of my feet how many times somebody had waved and like gone out of their way to make sure that I saw that there is what it felt like. I don't know because I wasn't in the car with them, but to that like waved and smiled at me. And so
and they
it's
were
bizarre.
white people.
Mm-hmm. It was bizarre because that's never happened to me before, ever, and not even just here, but anywhere. So, um, yeah, it was interesting. A little. I mean, I don't know. What was your reaction to that?
I just think I kept, well, I mean, when you were saying that all these people were waving, I'm from a small town. So when you're out, typically, well, you've been with me in Wasika, like you're always going to run into somebody you know, and it's going to be a Minnesota conversation where you say goodbye for 20 minutes. But like if I were to go home and be on a walk with my mom, we would wave often at people, like because you'd know them. So
Mm-hmm.
my initial reaction was like, oh, you saw, you know, people that that we know. And then it was like, oh shit, like this is white people acknowledging a brown dude in River Falls and waving. Like it was, I mean, you and I have had the inside joke about it, which I don't know if it's appropriate for like mass consumption, but we just keep waving at each other in our house. Like it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's interesting. And so it was funny. And I kept asking you like, is it funny? Is it weird? Is it, but
It
where
was
we,
weird, and I, you know, it's not. I don't think it's a function of like anything insidious and so I don't want to imply that like everybody hates me by any means because I know that's not the case, but it was just weird. Like I think there's a new awareness. People are so much their awareness is heightened right now.
right.
Um and so I think that was the physical manifestation of certain, you know, of people's heightened awareness. So
Heightened awareness meaning what?
like around issues with regard to race in this instance.
Somebody yelling in our house?
Ivy's lighting Apollo up. So
Ivy, she's good for that. Does she need help or do you think she's got it under control?
I think it sounds like she's got it under control.
I love that because he weighs more than she does. Um, I think where I went with it was an element of like, I don't want that to be the only thing that these people are doing. And so you and I then had the conversation where it was like, I waved at one of the brown guys in town. And so I'm a good white person.
Yeah.
And it felt a little suspicious to me, but then it was like, okay, what if every single person who waved at you, and if you did wave at Mike, that's lovely. And then the challenge becomes, what else are you doing? Don't let that be your good white person token, like Black People Appreciation Day or whatever happened that day, be the end of it. It was like, what if every single person who waved was also having difficult conversations, was also making donations, was also reading, White Fragility and having conversations with their family members. Like, what if that was just an extension of the work that they're already doing? And so we were talking about that being on a continuum, but I also wondered, I'm having a hard time putting language to it, because I keep thinking about it, like what that must be like for you to have someone, flick a cigarette at you or call names or circle the block so they can harass you, and then you were like a one-man parade. Like, I don't know how else I don't mean that disrespectfully, but I'm curious how you're internalizing it, or if you're not. Because I felt like I needed to apologize, like, oh, dude, that's weird. Sorry on behalf of white people. That's fucked up. Like, but I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm not necessarily internalizing it, and I'm not thinking necessarily about it in the context of a negative experience. I think I do think that it really is a function of where people are on the continuum. And again, this is purely speculation on my part. Like, I don't know these people. I've never had a conversation with them. They didn't hold up a sign that says like, I'm so sorry, but it did say to me that there's something happening and there are people who are experiencing a level of change, or a level of awareness that might not necessarily have been there before. And like you said, it's all on a continuum. And so if this is the beginning for these folks, that's fantastic. If this is part of the process, like you said, as long as they're participating in the conversation and they are doing their own work, then I think it's a good thing. I've said this before, and I had a conversation with a friend just before we got on this call, and I said, my goal is to model the behavior that I want those around me to also exhibit.
Which
is like being involved and taking proactive steps, and having conversations with people and asking questions.
And
curiosity and running, yeah, and like continuing to do the things that I do, right? Like, but I think that the fear that people sometimes can let take over, which then kind of brings them to a place of inaction because they're paralyzed.
Right. Which makes me wonder how many other people wanted to wave to you, but didn't.
Yeah.
If there's only a certain percentage, like.
Mm-hmm. So, it is on a continuum on multiple levels,
Right.
So it was just, it still was, I shared that story with other people, and, they kind of had the same reaction, like, what? Okay. Yep. See, that's what it feels like. If you just felt weird when she did that.
But it's so, I think I think the pendulum just swung so hard where it was like, and I still don't have like I think I'm always going to be holding my breath on some level while you're running.
Mm-hmm.
But being that nervous, and you and I have talked about this too, like just how nervous you and I have both been, or just how aware of our situation we've been, I think is being highlighted right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the pendulum swinging so far where it's like you'd come home and be like, dude, I can't run on F anymore, or I'm not going to run on, this road anymore, or whatever, to 10 white people waving at you is such that was a pretty big swing, but it still, it doesn't give me a sense of safety. It doesn't give me a sense of
that's
like
one day. That's 1 hour and a half in a day. That's 24 hours. So.
And so I want to use that as like a segue, because yesterday our family, I think of it as a pilgrimage, right? Like we drove to Minneapolis. It to me felt like you wanted to go 2 weeks ago, and I couldn't support that at the height of everything, from a safety perspective, from a we don't know what's happening perspective. But yesterday the Metro crew went to Minneapolis and to where George Floyd was killed. And I'm curious what that was like for you as a Black man in a multiracial family, for you as a human being. As you've had some time to reflect on it, I want to know like how it was for you.
It was surreal, for sure. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. Mm-hmm. I think the thing that caught me the most off guard was the energy in the air. Like it was hopeful to me. That's the, like the interactions that I was observing.
Your mic is really close to your mouth, babe. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
All right. So the interactions that I was observing was hopeful to me. Like, I know there's an underlying sense of like injustice and anger, but I think from that we have to get to the building phase, and so I felt like
what do you mean the building phase?
Like the building of the new paradigm, like the building of our new relationships, like the way that we treat people, the way that we think about people that we don't know, like that whole paradigm of the other, like I was watching, young kids and people in their 70s and 80s, and like they were all in this space together, and they were all affirming the idea of justice and reform. And
when you say the word justice, can you tell me what that word means to you?
That means like not just for George Floyd, but like the whole, like sorry, what?
You froze. So I was like, ooh, cliffhanger. Because right as you were about to say it, it froze.
Yeah, not just for George Floyd, and for everyone else. Like there's I don't know, not a vindication, but a confirmation that all of these people that came before him have been dealt an injustice, and the recognition on a mass, like global scale, that something has to change.
Right.
And the conversations and the private moments that were taking place last night and have been for 2 weeks, and I don't know for how much longer, but will continue to happen in that sacred space.
It was a sacred space, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Those things will continue to happen. So the conversation I was having before we got on, she was talking about having been at the memorial yesterday, earlier in the day, and a group of, I don't know how many guys, they were white veterans, showed up with a flag. And
was there a collective inhale of breath?
I don't I don't know. I think there was a, like, what's happening here? Well, they were there to pay tribute to him, and they wanted to so they did the flag folding ceremony and they left it there.
Oh God, oh, I
And
got
so,
goosebumps.
yeah, had that happened in another time in another place, those gentlemen might not have felt inclined to do that, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Or safe.
or safe. Yep. And so there are lots of stories like that, and I said I think those are the stories that we need to be sharing right now,
Mm.
because right now we're, because we're so evolutionarily inclined to focus on the negative and things that are different, from but those stories are impactful and meaningful. And she shared another story about these women who didn't know what to do, so um, and they, again, these are for upper middle class white women who might not have shown up to something like this in the past. They went to Bachman's and they've been bringing flowers like every day,
Oh
and handing
wow.
them out, like so um that to me indicates a different level of engagement from society at large on an issue
Mm.
that typically has, you know, I know we've talked about our short attention span and the news cycle, but this isn't just going away. I think people are engaged differently, and I'm
Why was it
hopeful.
important to you that our kids go on the hottest day of the year so far? It was so
Did you
hot.
you want to share before I go? I mean, like,
No, we'll get there, but
okay. So I think it was important for our kids to be in the presence of an energy that was, again, constructive and
mm,
collaborative, and reaffirming what we've talked about, where we're all people, and you matter, and like I was handing out the little pieces of paper and telling them that their dreams matter, and that
mm-hmm.
they matter, and
Did you see the bowl that he had?
with the
With
hands.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
beautiful. He was tall, man. He was
Yeah.
like had this presence and this energy, and he had this bowl that was shaped like hands, and he had these orange pieces of paper. Mine's in the bedroom. Can you
Yeah.
It should be right where you are, right on my side table there. But it said "You matter," and at first he gave it to the boys, and I watched Noah, and then Theo got one, and then Ivy got one, and I turned to him, and then you look up, and I was like, "Oh man, can you show it?" But he had these little slips of paper that say "You matter."
Backwards, but yeah.
No, it's right to me though.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but it
I've
was
got mine
this,
over there.
yeah, it was poignant to, especially, and this is coming from my experience. Like I know that I matter. Like I feel like I have known that, and maybe not my whole life, but um, watching our children receive that from someone, and I think they know they matter as well. But I also think hearing those words
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
when we
Yes.
were 10 feet from where George Floyd was killed, and for him to say like your dreams matter, especially to Theo, watching that, I was like, holy, I mean, it was holy there.
Mm-hmm.
And the art, oh my God. Like I think we went with another family, and I'm not sure if they'd be okay us sharing, but I was talking with the wife, the husband and the wife, maybe we can call them, but she and I were talking about the artwork and the drawings and the statues and the metal work, and I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it was something to see the
The creative
art.
expression
Oh,
of grief, you know,
well said. Yes, that there was
and
so much pain.
hope. I think there were, but there are also messages of, like, hope and progress mixed
And
in
I
with
think
that
you have
grief.
to have both, right? I think it's so
Hmm.
appropriate to do both, and
The
not
dark
to.
and the light, right? Like,
Yep. I saw something the other day about what we study matters, and that, like, I can't, the meme is escaping me, but it was like three different ways that people study, and then it was like, and healers study the darkness, and you study the darkness so that you can see the light. And I I was prepared to go there with it feeling really dark, with it feeling really somber. Remember when we went to the Anne Frank house and it was like no one spoke? There was no room for language.
Yep.
And
Well,
go ahead.
We made the mistake of going to the Van Gogh Museum and the Anne Frank house in the same day.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Holy hell. But there was I couldn't speak. I don't even know if they had a thing that was like, don't talk. I just don't think anybody did. But I, as we have been to places, like when we went to Gettysburg, it was the same thing. These places where history has been made and challenged and dismantled. And, you know, when you have people dying, like Gettysburg, anyway, I had prepared myself on some level that this would be a place that I couldn't speak. And that wasn't the case. There was still a reverence of speaking. Like there wasn't shouting, there wasn't, and obviously we were 2 weeks later, but you could feel the buzz. There was a elevated buzz.
Mm-hmm.
Why was it important for you to like be in the space? Because obviously we've seen the images on TV. We know the area. I mean, it wasn't like, I think we both could pinpoint where that was, right? Like from a geographical space, having lived there, but also, why did you need to go to the spot where he was killed?
I think it was to pay respect to the individual and to the energy of change and momentum, and then just as a human being, like it was, I think there was it could have been me, you know, that kind of a thing where it's like
you've not said that to me yet, so I gotta sit with that.
I mean, that just the it was an internal grieving process for Black men, and if for no other reason than just to like absorb that energy, you know, absorb some of the energy of that space, because it is, again, like I said before, it is now a sacred space. Like I don't know if you've shared what some of the artwork consisted of, but there was a painting of his body on the ground in the position that he was in with his hands cuffed, painted on the ground with a red velvet rope around it. And I think of all of the pieces and all the expressions of sadness and anger and desperation, maybe on some level, that was the most impactful one to me. Like right. In that prone position, it really put it into like it made it that much more real to me. And I think the other reason was to be in the presence of, you know, other people who were going through this same collective grief and collective anger, and just to bear witness, right? Like,
yeah. I think there's for me, it was a collective invitation in a way to stay engaged, to stay like, so growing up in Waseca in a small, you know, well, you called it the cornfield, so I guess we can call it that. Probably until, well, I mean, I'd never been in that level of diversity that we were in yesterday, the full 18 years I lived in Waseca, but yesterday, walking to the block and walking to where that was, and it was different colors and I mean, it was incredibly diverse. And I think, honestly, for the first time in my adult life, I walked into that space with more curiosity than fear, because I had been accustomed to fearing Black people. And walking into that block going, we are all here as human beings, right? Like there's so one of the images, so we've been watching more news, not in the last week, but well, I guess it was within the last week. I don't know, time's weird.
Mm-hmm.
But we were watching some of the protests with our kiddos, and our 7-year-old, I think it was a protest in Seattle that was on television, and she's like, look at that family. Like she thought it was like a family gathering, like it was a party. Look at that family. And that has shifted how I am looking at protests and how peaceful protests, how I'm looking, and honest to God, riots too, when it's like, those are also family members, right? Like it's shifted my perspective. And there was an element of community in that space. It's like we were all, this is going to sound super hippie trippy, but like it's like you could feel the energy of the Matrix, right? Like there was an element of connection that was very different for me as personally. But I walked in curious about every single person's story. Like, I wonder where you're from. I wonder how this is affecting you. I wonder if you have a job. I wonder, like, not because of race, but because of COVID. Let's be clear. Like, I wonder how this has affected the conversations you're having, when they had children. I'm thinking about it as like, if we are all family members, I felt that there. And it was, so something that we have at our house is the no complaint rule. And this started when we were traveling to Mexico at Christmas time when the kids were really, really small. And complaining is really hard for me, especially when I'm irritated and like traveling and whatever. So we implemented the no complaint rule in our house, and we bring it out for special times, and we bring it out when it's like, we got to lock this shit down. And so we did have the no complaint rule in effect yesterday, as we were traveling. And it was so hot. It was like 100 degrees, and we got there, at 7 at night? I mean, it wasn't like noon, but it's still concrete. It's still, buildings. And the only complaint, honest to God, that I heard was from our middle son, who did end up throwing up. He was overheated, and he and I talked about it last night at bedtime. He's like, my stomach was uneasy, like in the car, like anticipating what was going to happen. And then you've got 100 degree heat, and we're masked, right? And the energy's hot. And the only complaint was, Mama, I think I'm going to throw up. And then he did. And that's parenthood and revolution, if I've ever experienced them simultaneously. But there was not a complaint to be had. And for me, as we are integrating you being a one-man parade, and we're integrating the revolution into our family experience, the no complaint rule feels appropriate to me. And it's important to recognize when your body needs to throw up, or your body needs to cry, or your body needs to be held, or your body needs to go for a run. Like, but I think if we have the no complaint rule during the revolution, I'm curious to see what would happen to our collective family if we had a no complaint rule, but we were able to tell the truth, and we were able to say, my body is hurting, and we were able to say, I need help, or this is too much. But all that got synthesized for me there.
Well, and I think the biological response, I know we've had this conversation recently, and I've had it with other people, where it's like, people's fight or flight mechanism kicks in You know, there's this like evolutionary response to a perceived danger, whether it's, you know, literal or social, you know, however it's presenting itself. But I think listening to your body, and I've had this conversation about the ability to be, you know, there's a lot of, you know, we're talking about this awakening and heightened awareness that people are having. And in order for people to be receptive to the possibility of change, we have to be in a place to receive it, which requires like a central nervous system calming. And, you know, so I think the incorporation of like meditation and calming breathing techniques and those kind of things are going to also be part of the process of healing for people, and reckoning and learning and like, and being aware and being able to listen to your body and knowing what it's trying to tell you, so that you don't try to override it. Because when you override it, then, you know, it throws everything off kilter. Eventually it will catch up too.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're kind of freezing in and out, but I can hear what you're saying. And you and I have been, you know, a lot of people are reaching out, like, how are you guys doing this? Like, people are curious about how we identify our collective values, right? And how the tools that we're using to metabolize what's going on, but also to stay engaged. And so you and I have had conversations about how we can support families, how we can support individuals. And if you'd be interested in knowing more about, like, how did we figure out what our values are? Like, we talk about it like it's no big deal because to us it's a given. But if you're at that spot in your family where you're like, what the hell are our values? And how do I reset my nervous system? And I can't receive right now. This is another thing that I'm hearing, especially from the white women in my practice. Like, I don't have time to receive because the world's on fire. I got to go put out all the fires, right? And it's like, well, yes, and you still need to receive. So if you'd be interested in knowing more, Mike and I are talking about doing some workshops together, right? Maybe individually. Yes. But about how do you identify your values? So if you would be interested in that, you know, just drop the word workshop in the comments and we can reach out to you to kind of let you know what we're thinking. But our intention, like, we're not going anywhere. I think you and I think we've had a clear idea of what our purpose is. And I feel like it's expanded. It's been deepened. It's been the conversations that you and I have had behind closed doors for 20 plus years are now out on the street. And that is like, it makes me blush and feel vulnerable. Like, but that's where they need to be. And I think if you and I can assist other people in bringing those conversations out to the street, like, I think that our calling has deepened and shifted.
Yeah. Well, and I think like sharing your experiences, you know, can either be confirming or informing for people, and then also allow them.
What do you mean by informing?
Like, I had no idea, you know, like that was a thing, right? Like, so like, I didn't know that, you know, that you had, you know, fears about running, or I didn't know that, you know, like your central nervous system. So there's those, when you share your story or when you share information with someone, with an audience, then that allows those individuals to, you know, take that information in, and it either confirms something that they already knew or they thought they knew, or it informs them of something that they weren't aware of to begin with. And then that allows them the opportunity to take that information and take action on it somehow.
Right.
So
your face keeps freezing, sweetie. I can hear you and you sound great, but you're
I'm doing the robot.
You're doing like a dubbed video. What, you know, like, you're not, your mouth and your language doesn't match.
Right.
I think
English with English. Go ahead.
Right. I appreciate the informing part. And I think what I find so interesting about the informing part is, like, I also think people are really showing you where they are. I think people are showing you what they have thought behind closed doors. And you and I are kind of sifting through, where do we engage? And I think that is where having your individual values and your collective values comes in, because you and I have talked about things being on a continuum, and where are we on the continuum? And I'm not going out and talking to the people that have been on the front lines of social justice for years and years and years. And I'm not going to go talk to someone who thinks that you shouldn't be alive because you're Black. Like, we're not going to the ends of the continuum. We're going right where we are. And other people are showing up where they are on the continuum, and we're discerning, like, oh, you and I are pretty similar on the continuum, but how do we stretch, right? You and I there's no way that you and I will have a conversation on Facebook and I dare you to say all the shit you're saying on Facebook to my face, right? Like, that's, but I can't do the combative stuff. It doesn't, not online.
Energetically, you know, it's a time suck. Like, you're not going to change somebody's mind in a conversation
on a
thread.
Facebook thread. Right.
Yeah. So I think it's pointless to engage there until people are willing and ready to have a dialogue in a face-to-face scenario, whether it's virtual or otherwise. That's not where my energy and time is going to be spent.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate that. And so I think this feels like a kind of a completion to this video, if you feel okay about that.
I do.
Where it's, the pendulum swung in lots of ways this past few days, from the waving to the having the conversations out in a sacred space, to feeling like you and I have a different level of clarity. And I do think that that's happening for a lot of people. There's crystallizing and clarity that's happening. And as you and I get clearer on how we are meant to serve within this, stay tuned, because our intention is to be a bridge and to serve where we are on the continuum to the best of our ability, through storytelling, through sharing, but also through some really practical tools and techniques. So stay tuned for that. Yeah. And if you'd be interested, like I said, drop workshop in the comments and we can continue the conversation. Things are unfolding for us. So as we close, I'm curious if there's anything else you want to share, babe.
I did have a really cool conversation with prior to this with a woman who is in a interracial couple, where she's Black and he is white, and we had a really cool conversation about that, and I think that there may be an opportunity there for us to share some of that later on down the line. But I mean, that was a question that we talked about.
You and I mean?
Yeah, about what must that be like, and the fact that
Did you tell her about when we went out for dinner and they split with our other couple friend, where
I just
he was
talked
white
about
and
the
she was Black?
we went to, and
which one?
I can't remember what the concert was, but I just remember some of the looks and remarks.
Was it Indigo Girls?
No, I don't remember now.
What were the looks though? Or the
like
comments?
You should like I shouldn't be with you. Like I should be with a Black woman, and
yeah.
So,
and when we had dinner to finish that conversation, Mike and I were with another couple. She was Black and he was white, and they split the bill by race. That was,
yeah.
I was young too, man. Like I was like,
we were dating still, right? Like we didn't live together yet.
I think I still lived in La Crosse, maybe. I don't know, but I remember being like, "Oh shit! Like, can you do? You and I haven't even talked about your conversation prior to this, so I'm super curious. So, but I think there's so many layers of the onion, and there's so many spots on the continuum of service, and I think you and our purpose has been crystallized to. Maybe it's being conversation starters, right? And so, stay tuned. Mike and I are organizing around like, how often are we going to be coming to you with conversations? What are the topics? And truly, most importantly, how can we serve you where you are on the continuum? That it matters not just that Mike and I are having this conversation, but that you are willing to have these conversations and willing to be aware and compassionate of where you are personally, because that is where your point of power is. So stay tuned. So thank you for doing this again.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Appreciate you. And I am excited to hang up so that we can actually talk about what your conversation was like. I'm super curious. So thank you for joining us, friends. We genuinely do appreciate you. Again, as you're reaching out, we're getting back to you as fast as we can. And we appreciate your openness to watching this. And you're welcome to share all of these videos as well if you think it'll help. So cool. Okay, hold on, babe. I'm going to wrap here and then, okay. So
all right.
Thank you, friends. We will see you. We'll have more of a schedule as to when you can catch us live, and stay tuned for that. So be well.